The rain lashed against the windows as Nathan stood motionless, watching the storm through the glass. His chest tightened with each word Claire spoke, her voice cold, calculated. "I'm leaving you, Nathan," she said, not even flinching. "He can give me everything you can't." Nathan's hands trembled, but he didn't move. In his mind he had played this moment 1,000 times, always with a different ending, always with her choosing love over luxury. "So that's it?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Claire nodded, slipping off the necklace he bought her and placing it on the counter. "I wish things were different, but I have to choose what's best for me." The door clicked shut behind her, the echo of her heels fading down the hall. Nathan didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stood there, heart pounding in the silence, the storm outside echoing the one inside him. Nathan stood still in the center of the room long after she left, surrounded by the deafening hush of absence. The rain outside became white noise, indistinguishable from the static in his mind. Every corner of the apartment still carried traces of her coat draped over a chair, her perfume faint on the air. He reached out toward the counter where she left the necklace, fingers hovering just above it, but he couldn't bring himself to touch it. "She's really gone," he whispered to no one. The silence did not answer. The couch where they used to binge old movies, the photos on the wall, the coffee mugs for two, now just props in a love story, abruptly abandoned. Nathan finally sat on the edge of the bed, hunched forward, fingers laced together. His breath shuddered. The storm outside echoed a scream he couldn't release. He didn't move, as if staying still would stop the pain from growing louder. Nathan's memories rushed in like a tidal wave. He remembered their first night here, the pizza box on the floor, their laughter echoing through empty walls, the way she clung to him as if he were her anchor. He had believed in them, in something unbreakable. Now those moments felt staged, like ghosts playing tricks on his mind. His eyes drifted to a photo on the bookshelf, Claire resting her head on his shoulder, both smiling, carefree. That snapshot of joy now mocked him. He picked up the frame, held it for a moment, and placed it face down. The apartment hadn't changed, but he had. Something sacred had snapped. His heart, once so sure, now beat behind a fortress of doubt. The rain tapped rhythmically against the glass as if counting down his sorrow. The world kept turning, indifferent to what had shattered inside. In the kitchen, Nathan absent-mindedly rinsed a mug under cold water, watching the steam fade into the air. The mundane act felt surreal, as if he were acting out the role of a man abandoned. The sounds were familiar but hollow. The faucet dripping, the fridge humming, the floor creaking underfoot, haunting echoes of a routine that no longer belonged to him. He opened the fridge, stared blankly at the untouched groceries she liked, then shut it again. The silence began to mock him, loud in its emptiness. He turned on the kettle, then immediately switched it off. What was the point? Every action now carried the weight of what used to be. His hands finally dropped to the counter, supporting his weight, head lowered. "Come back," he mouthed, words that barely escaped the gravity of his chest. Night had fallen, but Nathan hadn't moved from the living room. He sat curled in a corner of the couch, a throw blanket draped around him like a shield. The storm outside had waned, but the emotional one inside him raged louder. Shadows stretched across the floor, long and distorted. His phone lay face down on the table, the screen lighting up briefly with a message he wouldn't check. He just stared at nothing, eyes glossed over. Around him were echoes of a life that no longer made sense. A wine glass half full. Her favorite book open to a bookmarked page. A candle still burning faintly. Everything still present, except her. His mind raced in loops. Could he have changed this? Should he have fought harder? Or did she always know she would leave? In that moment, Nathan stopped seeking answers. He simply allowed the grief to breathe. A week had passed since Claire left, but the world hadn't slowed for Nathan's pain. He found himself wandering into the old cafe where they first met. The chime above the door sounded the same, but the warmth was gone. He ordered her favorite, hazelnut latte, out of habit, then sat at their usual corner table. Everything around him was a mirror of the past. The worn wooden table where her fingers used to trace circles, the red brick wall behind her that caught the light in her hair. He stared out the window, watching strangers pass, each one detached, indifferent. She said this place felt like magic, he murmured, barely audible. The seat across from him remained empty. The coffee cooled untouched. Well, he wasn't expecting her to walk in, but part of him hoped. The ache didn't just sit in his chest. It lived in his hands, his eyes, the very air around him. Outside the cafe, Nathan's friend Marcus caught up with him, noticing the familiar slump in his posture. Still thinking about her? Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. Nathan nodded without speaking. They walked in silence for a while, shoes scuffing against the pavement, the overcast sky wrapping the streets in gray. You need to start living for yourself again, Marcus continued. She made her choice. Don't let her keep making yours. Nathan forced a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's not that easy, he said. She was everything, and I didn't see it ending like this. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. None of us ever do. They paused at a streetlight, surrounded by strangers, each carrying their own ghosts. Nathan realized he was just one among millions learning how to breathe again after being left behind. Nights became Nathan's worst enemy. Sleep eluded him, memories flooding in the moment his head touched the pillow. He'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, reliving every laugh, every touch, every whispered promise. His phone buzzed once, an unknown number. He didn't check. Instead, he scrolled through old photos, Claire blowing out birthday candles, Claire in his hoodie on a Sunday morning, Claire curled up with a book. Each image stabbed a little deeper. Finally, he threw the phone across the room. It hit the floor with a thud but didn't break, just like him. Why wasn't I enough? He whispered into the silence. The apartment offered no reply, just the low hum of loneliness settling into the walls like dust. He curled into himself, blanket pulled tight, and let his tears fall soundlessly, soaking into the pillow like secrets never told. Desperate to process the chaos in his mind, Nathan started journaling. At first it was just angry scribbles, accusations, regrets, unsent letters. Then came vulnerability. He wrote about the nights he watched her sleep, the dreams they planned, the small ways she made his world brighter. Writing became a ritual. Every evening he'd sit by the window, pen trembling in his hand, pouring out truths too raw to speak aloud. He didn't write to move on. He wrote to remember who he was before her, and who he needed to become without her. The pages filled up quickly, the ink bleeding into the paper like wounds, refusing to clot. Sometimes he'd pause mid-sentence, staring at the storm beyond the glass, hoping it might carry his pain away. But the rain, like grief, only settled in deeper the longer it stayed. Meanwhile, across the city, Claire's life sparkled on the surface but echoed hollow within. Draped in designer dresses, she clinked glasses at rooftop bars and posed for filtered selfies beside her new man, Ethan, a venture capitalist with a smile as polished as his watch collection. But behind her eyes was a flicker of unease. Every laugh felt forced, every kiss mechanical. She stared at her reflection in the gold-framed mirror of their luxury suite and barely recognized herself. "This is what I wanted," she whispered, her voice flat. Yet the silence that followed didn't agree. Ethan talked endlessly about deals and destinations, but never asked about her favorite book, her dreams, her pain. He saw beauty, not the woman beneath it. And as Claire stood alone on the balcony that night, champagne in hand, city lights sprawling before her, she wondered, had she traded love for glitter? It was on a Wednesday afternoon that Nathan met Julia. She was a graphic designer visiting the local print shop, where he'd taken a few of his journal pages to be bound. She noticed the handwritten text and said, "That looks like poetry." He smiled for the first time in days. Just thoughts. Julia had an ease about her, bright eyes, frizzy auburn curls, and a voice like autumn. They spoke for 20 minutes, then exchanged numbers casually. That night, Nathan found himself smiling again as he typed, "Nice meeting you today." She replied almost instantly. Conversations began to unfold. Long, thoughtful, and honest. Still, each time he laughed, guilt shadowed the joy. Claire's memory wasn't gone. It lingered like a ghost between texts and silences. But Julian never pushed. She listened without demanding space. And for the first time, Nathan felt like he might have a way out of the wreckage. Claire's world continued to dazzle on the surface. At a rooftop restaurant, cameras flashed as she leaned into Ethan, who placed an expensive watch on her wrist like a badge of ownership. She smiled, lips glossed, eyes hollow. Her laughter was mechanical, sharp, polished, and wrong. When she excused herself and stepped into the restroom, the silence hit like a punch. Her phone buzzed. A tag in a photo from one of Ethan's parties. As she scrolled, one image stopped her. Ethan, arm around a brunette she didn't recognize, laughing in the same way he did with her. A second image followed. And a third. Claire's hands trembled. Her stomach dropped. The bathroom mirror showed a woman she barely knew. Her reflection was beautiful, dressed in silk. But inside, she was unraveling. The gold, the champagne, the skyline, all suddenly looked like shadows trying to cover up a lie. Claire confronted Ethan that night, phone clutched tight in her hand. "Who is she?" she asked, voice low but sharp. Ethan didn't blink. "A friend," he shrugged, sipping from his crystal glass. "You're reading too much into it." Claire's breath caught. "You said I was the only one." He gave a wry smile. "I said you were special, not exclusive." The room spun. "I left someone who loved me for this," she snapped. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe you should have stayed." That line sliced deeper than anything else. Claire turned away, heels clicking on marble, breath shallow. Outside, the city buzzed beneath her. Her hands shook as she clutched the railing. She had traded warmth for wealth, loyalty for luxury, and now stood cold and alone, wearing a dress that felt more like a costume than a crown. Claire's first attempt to reconnect was a simple message. "Hey." Nathan saw it and stared, unmoving. The screen glowed in the darkness of his room. 1,000 emotions surged at once: confusion, anger, sorrow. But he didn't respond. Days passed. Then came another, "Can we talk?" Still, no reply. Nathan opened Julia's latest text instead, smiling softly. She'd sent a photo of her messy sketchbook with the caption, "My brain looks like this today." He replied with a joke. Yet beneath his laughter, a question lingered. Was it really over with Claire? Did he owe her a conversation? That night, Nathan sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, thumb hovering over her name. And then, without hesitation, he blocked her. Not out of hate, but to reclaim the silence she had shattered. It was time to heal, not to reopen scars. Nathan stood at the riverbank, journal in hand, the late afternoon sun casting golden streaks across the water. He took a deep breath, pages fluttering in the breeze. One by one he tore out the earliest entries, letters written to Claire, pages stained with grief, and fed them to the wind. They danced like ash before settling on the river's surface and drifting away. Julia waited a few feet behind, giving him space but holding presence. When he turned to her, there was no need for words. She offered a soft smile, and he nodded. Something inside had shifted, not erasure but release. Claire would always be a chapter in his life, but not the end. Together, Nathan and Julia walked along the river, shadows long behind them, and for the first time in a long while, his heart beat without pain. The silence in Ethan's penthouse became unbearable. Claire scrolled endlessly, but no new messages came. The man who once flooded her with attention now left her unseen. One night, she walked into the living room to find his bags packed. "You're leaving?" she asked. Ethan didn't stop zipping his suitcase. "I met someone new. It happens." Claire's voice cracked. "You said we were building a life." He paused, finally looking at her. "No, Claire. You wanted someone who could give you everything. I gave you that, but you don't even know what you want." And just like that, he walked out. No dramatic pause, no fight, just a door that didn't open again. Claire collapsed onto the designer couch, surrounded by riches that suddenly felt worthless. Her reflection shimmered in the window, perfectly styled, heartbreak barely concealed. But now, there was no one left to perform for. Claire moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the city's quieter edge, a far cry from her former view of penthouse skylines. Gone were the silk sheets and marble countertops. Now it was mismatched furniture, bare walls, and a broken toaster that sparked when plugged in. She sat on the floor eating instant noodles, staring at her phone with the same name at the top, Nathan. Her thumb hovered over the call button. But she didn't press it. She didn't know what she would say. "Sorry I left? Sorry I picked money over love?" Her stomach twisted. In this stillness, she finally faced herself. Not the socialite, not the arm candy, but the woman who had burned something real for the illusion of more. The silence of her new home was different. Not hollow like before, but raw, like the truth finally had room to echo. Desperate for a connection, Claire reached out to old friends, but they were different now, or maybe she was. Conversations felt forced, memories too fragile to revisit. One night, she called Sam, a mutual friend of hers and Nathan's. "How is he?" she asked quietly. Sam paused before replying. "He's doing well. Happier, I think." Claire's heart twisted. "Is he seeing someone?" Sam hesitated, then answered, "Yeah, her name's Julia. She's good for him." Claire swallowed the ache rising in her throat. "Good," she said, forcing the word out. After the call ended, she lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Her chest felt tight, like grief had finally caught up. Not just for losing Nathan, but for not realizing what she had until it was already beyond her reach. Back in his world, Nathan was healing, not quickly, but steadily. Julia had a way of grounding him. She'd bring sketchbooks to the park, ask deep questions, or just sit with him in silence. One afternoon, they lay in the grass as autumn leaves swirled around them. Julia rested her head on his chest, and he found himself smiling. Not with guilt, but with peace. He still remembered Claire, but the memory no longer owned him. When Julia laughed at a joke he made, it felt like sunlight cracking through a winter sky. She wasn't a replacement. She was something new, gentle, present, real. Nathan watched the clouds shift above and thought, for the first time in a long while, that maybe the pain had been a necessary storm. Without it, he might never have known what peace really looked like. Claire showed up at Nathan's office one rainy morning. She hadn't planned it. It was impulse, desperation, and something she couldn't name. She waited near the front desk, soaked from the walk, hair matted to her face. When Nathan emerged from the elevator, their eyes locked. He stopped mid-step, unsure whether to turn back or move forward. "Hi," she said softly. He said nothing. I needed to see you." His expression was unreadable. "Why now?" She looked down. "Because I made a mistake, and I think about it every day." The pause stretched between them like a wire, thin and trembling. Nathan finally exhaled. "Claire, it's too late. No malice. Just truth." She nodded, eyes glassy but accepting. The receptionist called him, and he turned, walking away slowly. Claire stood there alone, surrounded by silence and the soft drip of her umbrella. Claire stood in the hallway outside Nathan's apartment, rain trickling down her coat, hands trembling. She had rehearsed the words 1,000 times, but none felt right. When the door opened, Nathan looked at her, not with anger, but a quiet, distant compassion. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," she began. He didn't interrupt. "I messed up. I thought I needed more, but I didn't realize I already had everything." She laughed bitterly. Turns out, more meant less. Nathan sighed, his posture guarded, but not hostile. "Why are you really here, Claire?" She met his gaze. "To say I'm sorry, to ask if there's any way back." Silence. The rain continued tapping the awning above them. "You were my home," she whispered. His expression faltered, but only for a moment. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but that home burned down." Claire stepped into the apartment. Everything looked the same, yet everything had changed. She scanned the room, Julia's scarf on the chair, a shared photo on the shelf. Nathan stood by the window, arms crossed. "So, you're with her?" she asked gently. He nodded. "And she's good for me." Claire took a deep breath. "Well, better than I was." Nathan turned, facing her fully now. "She didn't leave." Claire winced, swallowing guilt. "Do you love her?" A pause. "I'm learning to. And she's teaching me what love without fear feels like." Claire looked around one last time, trying to memorize the warmth that wasn't hers anymore. "I didn't expect forgiveness," she said. "But I hoped." Nathan's voice was soft. "I forgive you, but I've moved on." Tears welled in her eyes, and she nodded. "Then I'll go." And this time, she meant it. Claire walked the familiar streets, no destination in mind. The city hummed around her, people rushing, lives continuing. She passed the park where she and Nathan once lay under summer skies, now blanketed in winter gray. Every corner carried echoes, laughter in alleyways, quiet kisses on late-night walks, shared coffee in hand. She reached the bridge where he once told her, "No matter how hard life gets, promise me you'll always come back to yourself." She hadn't. But maybe now she could try. Claire pulled her coat tighter and let the cold wind sting her cheeks. Not as punishment, but as proof that she could still feel. And beneath the ache, something subtle stirred. Resolve. Not to win him back, but to find herself again. Not for anyone else, just for her. That evening, Nathan sat across from Julia in a quiet cafe, the golden light inside contrasting the snowy world beyond. She looked up from her tea. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "Claire came by today." Julia didn't flinch. "How do you feel?" He considered. "Sad, but lighter." She smiled, gentle and understanding. "Closure, maybe. I think I needed to know I could face her and not fall apart." Julia reached across the table and took his hand. "That's how you know you've healed." He gave her a grateful look, squeezing her hand. For the first time, Nathan spoke without Claire's ghost in the room. Every word he shared with Julia now came from the man who survived heartbreak, not defined by it. And as they laughed over an old memory, the future no longer felt like a gamble. It felt earned. Claire returned home, dropped her keys on the counter, and sat by the window with a journal in her lap. She flipped to a blank page and stared at it. Then, slowly, she began to write. Not about him, but about herself. Her fears. Her dreams. Her mistakes. Her hope. The words came out uneven at first, but grew steadier. She wrote until the page was full. Then, another. And another. Her pen moved with purpose. She was no longer chasing someone else's approval. She was finding her voice. Outside, the city blinked to life. Inside, Claire sat still but full, not broken but rebuilding. Her past would always exist, but it no longer controlled her. In the silence, she smiled. Small. Sincere. The kind that comes not from being loved, but from finally loving yourself again. Nathan stood in his living room, a cardboard box at his feet, filled with memories he was finally ready to let go of. Inside were old photos, a movie stub, her letters, things that once felt sacred. He pulled out the last picture of Claire, her smiling under summer light, wearing his hoodie. He stared at it for a long time, then placed it gently in the box. With a deep breath, he carried it to the fireplace. The first flames were hesitant, but quickly rose as the paper caught. Shadows danced across the walls as smoke curled upward. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. It was quiet inside him, like standing at the shore after a storm. When the fire settled into glowing embers, Nathan stood for a moment longer, then turned and walked away. The past, once too loud to silence, had finally burned into stillness. Claire stood across the street from Nathan's apartment, hidden beneath an umbrella as snow flurried around her. Through the window, she could see him moving inside, laughing, talking, holding Julia's hand. It was simple, domestic, warm. She didn't move, didn't approach. She just watched, a quiet ache blooming in her chest. This wasn't jealousy anymore, it was understanding. This was the peace she never gave him. And now, someone else did. A car honked behind her, pulling her from the trance. Claire turned, walking back into the night, boots crunching against the fresh snow. Each step felt lighter than the one before. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she finally accepted that she wasn't part of that world anymore. And maybe, just maybe, she could create her own. In the quiet of the park, Nathan knelt beside Julia beneath a canopy of golden trees. Leaves rustled in the breeze as he opened a small velvet box. "You found me when I didn't know I was lost," he said, voice steady. "You saw me before I remembered how to see myself." Julia's eyes welled up, hands covering her mouth in surprise. "Yes," she whispered before he could even ask. Laughter and tears mixed as they embraced, the moment sealed not by extravagance, but truth. Around them, nature stood still, as if granting its silent blessing. Nathan had loved before. But this was different. It wasn't a rescue. It was a rebuilding. He hadn't moved on because he forgot. He moved on because he finally understood what love was meant to feel like, calm, sure, and real. Claire sat in a circle of chairs at a small community center, a sign reading, "Healing Through Honesty" on the wall. She clutched a cup of lukewarm tea as others shared their stories. When it was her turn, she hesitated, then spoke. "I used to think love meant being adored, having someone make me feel like I mattered more than I was. But I learned that love isn't a spotlight, it's a mirror." Her voice trembled, but she continued. "I hurt someone. I ran from myself. And now, I'm learning to stop running." A few nods, a soft smile from the woman next to her. It wasn't a grand confession. It wasn't dramatic. But it was honest. And in that room, Claire felt lighter. The first bricks of her own foundation had been laid. Not built on someone else, but on truth. Claire stepped into her tiny kitchen, hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up, ingredients scattered across the counter. She was baking, burning things, laughing at herself, singing off key. Flour dusted her cheek as she danced between the oven and the sink. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and something slightly overcooked, but it was hers. She set the timer and collapsed onto the couch with a sigh. On the table, her journal lay open to a list titled, "What I Like About Myself." It was still short, but growing. She picked up a pen and added, "I keep going." The oven dinged. She smiled and stood. No applause. No witness. Just a woman in her own story, finally learning how to live it. And that, she realized, was enough. The wedding wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. A garden at sunset, close friends, string lights above, and laughter in the air. Nathan stood at the altar, Julia's hand in his, eyes glistening but steady. As he gave his vows, his voice trembled not from nerves, but from gratitude. "I used to think love had to be loud to be real," he said. "But you showed me love is in the quiet choices, the daily kindness, the shared silences. You showed me that healing isn't forgetting, it's learning to hold joy again." Julia's eyes shimmered as he continued. "You're my peace, my partner, my second beginning." Applause followed, but Nathan didn't hear it. He saw only her, the woman who helped him rise from his own ruins. And in that moment, nothing else existed but hope made flesh. Far across town, Claire sat alone on a park bench, watching a street musician play a soft melody on an old guitar. The sound wrapped around her like memory, gentle, nostalgic, forgiving. Children played nearby. Couples passed hand in hand. Life moved, unburdened. She sipped her coffee and leaned back, eyes closed, letting the music wash over her. A song she didn't recognize, but somehow knew. Her phone stayed in her bag. No texts. No scrolling. Just presence. For the first time she wasn't watching someone else's life wishing it were hers. She was living hers, even if it was quiet, even if it was slow. The ache was still there, but no longer in control. She smiled at the musician, dropped a few coins in his case, and walked on. Not towards someone. Not away. Just forward. In her small apartment, Claire unrolled a canvas on the floor. It was her first time painting in years. The colors poured freely. Not perfect, not planned, but alive. Strokes of green, blue, crimson. She painted with her hands, barefoot, music playing low in the background. It wasn't art for anyone else. No approval. No posting. Just expression. Her shirt was smudged with paint, her cheeks flushed with life. With every stroke, she rewrote the narrative of who she was. Not a woman abandoned. Not someone who chased ghosts. But a creator, a survivor, a soul reclaiming its language. When she stepped back and looked at the chaos of color, she laughed. A pure, unscripted laugh that startled even her. It wasn't about being healed. It was about healing. In motion. In creation. In truth. Wind. Nathan and Julia walked hand in hand down a quiet cobbled street, the glow of street lamps reflecting in puddles from a passing rain. Their laughter echoed softly in the night air. They paused at a small bookstore's window display, eyes dancing over titles, fingers still entwined. "We should come back tomorrow," Julia said. "Only if we promise not to leave with 10 books, Nathan teased. She grinned. No promises. They leaned into each other as a breeze passed. No grand declarations. No urgent drama. Just two people who had fought their separate storms and found calm in each other. As they walked on, the camera of life zoomed out, not to distance them but to show the path behind and ahead. And for once it wasn't the past that followed them. It was possibility. Claire stood at the edge of the old cafe, the one where it all began. She didn't go inside. She didn't need to. She just looked through the glass, smiled at the new faces inside, and turned away. Her coat billowed behind her as the wind carried the scent of roasted beans, and something sweeter, closure. She crossed the street, paused at the bench where she and Nathan once sat side by side. It was empty now, and that was okay. She sat, pulled out her journal, and wrote one last line. "I loved, I lost, I learned." She underlined it, closed the book. In that quiet moment, with no one watching, no stage to stand on, she whispered to the air, "Thank you for the ending." A final tear slid down her cheek. Not of sadness, but of release.